the Civil War Guru Show. My name is Steve Munson, and I am the Civil War Guru. And of course, today I'm dressed a little heavy. The reason why, it's 12 degrees below zero. And we're trying to stay warm here in the office. So what I have here today is really an outstanding piece of history. I have a little grouping here, and what it is, it's a Remington revolver with the holster and a Confederate flag, that is a Union flag. And this grouping came via a friend of mine who had actually bought it in 1932, and he died a few years ago, and his son wanted me to get it out here and get some exposure on it. And what this is, this pistol in 1932 was in a little historical society in the county, and it had a little label on it that said Remington revolver used by one of Quantrill's raiders. Now here in Kentucky, and especially here in Nelson County is Bardstown, is where we are. And right down the street here in Wakefield, which is about 10 miles, that's where they ended up capturing, shooting Quantrill. Of course, he got shot through the spine, paralyzed him, and killed some of his comrades. Captured him and took him into Louisville. And of course, he died about a month later. And some of the guys that were with him, and one was Frank James. And of course, there's a question whether Jessie James was with him or not. Some people said he was in a little town called Chaplin, and other people say he was in Texas. But I think he was close to his brother somewhere. And and there's far better historians on Jessie and Frank James than me. But locally here is the Samuel's name. Now Samuel's name is very prominent here in Nelson County because of Bill Samuels, and he was the CEO of Maker's Mark Bourbon Whiskey. And Jessie's mother married a Samuels, and even after the war, that's why they came to Bardstown. One of the guys that also rode with Quantrill was a guy named Donnie Penske, and after the war, he became sheriff of Nelson County, and he kind of let the James boys come in and out of Bardstown absolutely unscathed, and of course, there's records of them doing that. So this is kind of a safe haven for the James family through the Samuels connection. But we get back to the pistol. And the pistol is it's the new model Remington 58. That's a 44 caliber. And it's in wonderful condition. And it's in a bobbed little holster, military holster, been cut out. And about an inch been cut off the barrel professionally. And the grips have been checkered. And so anyway, what the unusual part about this pistol is that we took the grips off to inspect it. And there's a wonderful remembrance thing carved into the grips. And you'll see that here shortly. And it says, from Jessie James to F.H., and that's Andrew Foley Hayes, and 1860s, in St. Joe, Missouri. And I assume that Mr. Hayes carved this in here. It was gifted to him from Jessie, and I'm not going to say post-war. I'd say this is certainly during the war. And there's the documentation to support this is pretty good. And of course, you go back to Missouri, and prior to them coming here to Bardstown, Kentucky, the last of the Quantrill guys, this guy Hayes lived about 12 miles from the James family, and we're connecting all the dots on that. And he was recruited by a guy named Jarrett in 1863, and that's who also recruited the James boys. And Jessie came in 64, so somewhere in 64, 65, and I'd say during the Civil War, he ended up with his pistol, and they were in the same company together. They rode with Sterling Price, or under Joe Shelby. Those are some famous names of the Confederacy. But their main guy they were under was Quantrill and Bloody Bill Anderson. But this is a really unique opportunity to have one of these things. You know, there's the James pistols that directly from the family, stayed in the family. And there's the one that Jessie's mother would go down to the hardware store and buy a pile of them and sell them as souvenirs. And this is not that. This is a gun somewhere during the Civil War. It was given from Jessie to Foley Hayes, and we have recovered and a lot of historical documents here, and you'll see some of them. And the most important thing is we got a picture of him. And then there's pictures of him after the war, which is really unique. When they start having the Quantrill reunions, you know, they really didn't want to go to them because most of these guys were hated and hunted. But in the 1880s, 1890s, they started going to them. And Mr. Hayes was one of the organizers of these reunions. And the flag that you see behind me here is a banner, actually. And on the back of it, there's a paper tag to where this thing was made in St. Louis. And of course, you know, he fought in the 5th Missouri Cavalry. They all legitimized themselves by flying under one Confederate flag prior to their guerrilla activities. And so anyway, you have the banner here, and he organized it. And there's several pictures of him sitting next to Frank. Then in the late 1890s, when Cole Younger, who got captured up in Minnesota from a bank robbery, he was there with Mr. Hayes. And it's funny, the engraving under the grip of the pistol is got Jesse James, and Jesse spelled with an I-E. Well, Jesse didn't spell his name with an I-E, he spelled it just J-E-S-S-E. And Mr. Hayes would sign him in as J-E-S-S-I-E. So certainly it's in his hand, and engraving under the grips is in his hand. So he had a fond experience and thought a lot of Jesse and Frank, because you see him when Frank did attend, that he was always sitting there next to him on the front row. And there's photographs of this, which we have the documentation on that also. But anyway, this is one of those really unique things that you come across in collecting, and it's untouched. This isn't one that's been shopped around and that people say, oh yeah, that's a Jesse James. You know, the Jesse James guns are really, really documented. The ones that he actually, at the end of his life, you know, in the house where he was killed, and in his possession, those things were documented. They stayed in the family, and they went into trust funds and museums, and then of course the ones that his mother sold. There's several of those things over the years that popped up. But this is a kind of a different, unique gun, because this was a gift from him to Mr. Hayes, and nothing to do with the outlaws. And you know, we haven't connected any dots. Did he ride with him after the war? Of course, Frank and Jesse, they had a real close-knit group, and we're, like I say, we're still researching. And this guy was born and raised, is a few miles down the road from Jesse and Frank, and he was a year older than a year or two older than Jesse, and so these guys knew each other, and then of course at the end of Mr. Hayes' life, he lived until 1925, and he was in a rest home there in a little town there near St. Joe, Missouri. And so, you know, the apple didn't fall too far from the tree, as they say here in Kentucky. But, you know, Quantrill, at the end in '65, when he came into Kentucky, you know, he came in with a bunch of Kentucky boys. And, you know, and they knew that if they got to Nelson County, they had a safe haven. And, you know, so they did make it here. And after the war, there's all kinds of documents where Frank and Jesse, who were actually in the thoroughbred business, and actually had great race horses, and they passed in and out through Nelson County here. So a lot of wonderful, rich history from Nelson County here. A great pistol with magnificent, untouched condition, and it was made, like I say, in late '63. Maybe I wouldn't think any later than that. And the banner / flag is just magnificent and straight from St. Louis. And all this interconnects together, and Mr. Hayes also was a fan, and we have some newspaper articles that was in the box that we got this stuff in, that he had clipped out over the years about Jesse when Jesse got killed, and really adds a little ambiance to it. But this is a really unique piece of history, and we want to get out here and share it with you. And value, I have no idea. You know, it's whatever somebody will pay for one. But this has a real good link to the Jesse James thing. But more than that is the Quantrill guerrilla relationship and all the hard riding and fighting they were doing under the Quantrill banner, the Partisan Rangers. So my grandson here, Brendan Cole, it's 7:30 in the morning and 12 degrees below zero. So he's going to shake off the ice cubes and get the camera up here close and personal and get some real good shots of this for you. And if you have any questions, as usual, you can email the old guru. We're still here and we're still ticking. So from the Civil War Guru, have a great day.
I'm going to make a couple final points on this Jesse James pistol. One is the spelling of his name under the grip. Now in front of you we have the document, a copy of it, and it's from the Jesse James photo album, and this is compiled during one of the Quantrill Raiders reunion. And this particular one was in 1924. Now the Sergeant at Arms was Mr. Hayes. And if you look at this, I'm going to zoom in on the name itself. He would always, out of respect and with concurrence with his other reunion Raiders, that they would sign Jesse James in honorably, and that he was there in spirit. And so you can see from the signature there, and it's pretty close to what's underneath the grip of the pistol. Of course, a lot of these guys were illiterate, so we don't know how literate Mr. Hayes was. But he has the spelling here, and it is in his hands. And this is a big point of connected the dots. Now I'm going to zoom in on it for you, and you can take a good look at it. From Jesse James to Mr. Hayes, and we believe it's done in this 1864-65 era, and it could have been a little later. And the reason we say this is because this gun here has some unusual things that have been done to it, which only a gunsmith can do. And first, as we said before, the barrel's been cut back an inch. Now this thing's been cut back by a professional. We're not talking about a blacksmith. This was done by a gunsmith, and the grips have been checkered. Now, as we know, that Quantrill come into Kentucky with a little over 30 men, and a lot of Kentucky boys with him. And in Bardstown is one of the famous gunsmiths, the Reiser and Weller group here, and they did magnificent Kentucky rifles and plains rifles and pistols. And it took somebody of that caliber to take this thing and put it back to where it is almost like factory. I mean, I've looked at the work on the end of this muzzle, and the quality of that work is extremely well done. I mean, if you didn't know that it had been sharpened, you'd think it's factory work. So we look at that, and we look at the grips. The grips are checkered, and Reiser and Weller were famous for checkering the grips on their Kentucky pistols and some of their Kentucky rifles and some other work, and this is exactly their style. I'm almost to the T. So we believe that this gun was refitted, freshened up right here in Bardstown, and as we spoke that they had this Bardstown connection. They came through here, forever, from 1865 to the 1870s, when Donnie Pence was the sheriff here. So there's a good indication, again, connecting all the dots, that this thing was refitted, refurbished here in Bardstown, Kentucky. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to have my girlfriend hold this muzzle up here, and I've got a Cold Army that has not been bobbed, and it's got barrel wear on it, and you can see what we're talking about by cutting the barrel back and freshening it up. All right, I'm going to hold this thing up here. So bear with me. We're going to hold this up, and then I'm going to get her hold this Cold Army up, and see if I can get a better shot at it. There we go. Alright. Let me zoom in a little bit closer. See. There you go. Alright. Right here on this muzzle, this has been perfectly cut back, dressed down, and on the inside where you're rifling there, it's got a little reverse crown on it, and that's called crowning a muzzle. And that is the most important for accuracy. So Mr. Hayes that owned this pistol, or Jesse prior to even giving it to Mr. Hayes, is this thing was re-accuracized. I assume that's the right nomenclature to say for it. So because he wanted it perfect. So right there, if you look how wonderfully that's been bobbed back, it looks like factory work. You can compare it with a factory gun, you could not tell. So that was an expert that did that. And let me slide this Cold Army over a little bit more. And you can see on the end of the muzzle right here, that's called holster wear. and I assume that's what happened to the Remington. And you see it's rolled over, and the crown is gone. That pistol wouldn't hit a broadside of a barn. So the guy that had the Remington, he expected the best performance out of a pistol, and that was this pistol. So these guns were in percussion, so that's why we were saying that. And let me let Melinda put these down. These were in percussion, which was in vogue in the Civil War, and also through the early 1869, 70, 71, they used these little percussion guns, and as we know that Jessie and Frank, they love Remingtons, and so that's another little clue of when you think this thing got presented, and when we think it got presented, and I think that adds a lot of I guess credence to what I'm trying to put across here, because this was a gun, like I say, in the final days of Jesse James, he wasn't carrying this gun. This was a gun that was gifted to a great Quantrill raider, Mr. Hayes, and evidently somewhere in their lives that he did something wonderful for Jesse, and Jesse presented him with his pistol. All right, that's the final point. Thank you.